All right, so we're going to be talking about increasing our athleticism, increasing our jump, increasing our speed here. They're all beneficial things that we're going to need as volleyball players. And I've put together a couple different videos and sections that are going to allow you to get kind of an understanding of what it takes to develop those skills, translate that into a program, and then the exercises and movements that you're going to really need to focus on. And it's a big process, so I really encourage you to put in the time and effort, which will be greatly rewarded. So we're first off going to need some interactive here. We're going to need some paper and a pen, and we're going to have to write down and create your own kind of plan. So I'm going to go through this kind of video is going to be a guide for you to create your own plan and to understand what it's going to need to take to achieve those goals that you set out. So first off, we're going to be talking about jump and what exactly, and hang time, what exactly is that? So a lot of it is the amount of energy and force that we can put into the ground on takeoff. So all your jump, everything that factors in is into your takeoff, into the momentum that you create, and into the explosion off the ground that you put energy into the floor. And that is your force over time and a great amount of energy that you create. So once you've left the ground, you can't really do anything. That's when you start working on your arm swing and your hit. But all that energy to jump with is all created from the ground first. So we're going to go over that. So next thing is I'm going to have a little bit of some people talk here and some videos that are going to show some real science-based things about exactly what it takes and what the science is behind your jump and what exactly that is. And then we're going to go into some basic body movements and muscles and some interesting things of what each muscle really does, because you kind of need an understanding of what each muscle group or what your body is doing. And then finally, it's going to be a bunch of exercise videos that are really good to incorporate. So if you've already seen the first section and you're going through that, you can skip ahead, obviously, but I would really encourage you to watch the first section. This is really important on understanding things. So you need to watch the first section, and then we're going to get into the exercises. So I want you to write down 4 different categories here for exercises. We need to hit each 4 different types. And so when each exercise comes in, I'm going to label them and give you the example of these, of that type. So say, for example, it's going to be like a plyometric jump. That's going to be one of the examples of a plyometric quick body weight exercise. So there's going to be 4 here. So 1, let's put down the first exercise group. The first exercise grouping is weight training. So decent amount of weight, strength, real just strength training, getting those actual muscles working and lifting and increasing the actual strength of those muscles. So first group category is weightlifting. That's where you got your squats, your cleans, your dumbbell squats, your major lifting weights movements. Next, number 2 is going to be your quick, kind of easier weight exercise explosive movements. So it's going to be explosive movements with weight. So what that means is like your kettlebells and your light lunge with a jump. So if you say you have 10 or 15 pounds in your hand, say you do box jumps with a couple weights, anything that you're going to do with weights that are explosive movements that aren't super heavy. So the first category is heavy weights. The second grouping of categories is movements with easier weights that are explosive movements that are working on speed and agility. Your third category group is going to be explosive jumping movements. So these are your plyometrics. These are your box jumps. These are your tap and go kind of different explosive movements, your sprints, all kind of things like that. Your fourth and last category is resistant bands and different kind of resistance-based exercises that are explosive movements. So maybe lunges or squats or stuff like this kind of thing that are fast with elastic kind of bands that are working a different type of quick twitch muscles. So it's all about quick twitch muscles, and those are the 4 categories. And we're gonna every time we get into an exercise, I'm gonna list one of the what this category falls under, and then you can go from there. So first off, I want to go a little bit over the science-based things, and we're gonna have some guys talk here that are pretty well known, and they have some really good information. So we're gonna start here.
So how do we increase our hang time? This is a question that I've gotten a lot in the past. And one question that you guys have asked a lot is, what can you do in the air to increase your hang? So instead of looking at what someone like Michael Jordan does in the air, we got to look at what he does on the ground. If you want hang time like Mike, we need impulse like Mike. So this is what I dedicate a lot of my time to, and the majority of my athleticism programs is centered around how do we increase relative impulse. So let me give you a quick overview, and we've talked about this a lot on EdU, and we'll continue to talk in more detail on EdU. Impulse is basically force times time. So how do we get a bigger impulse? We either increase the force or we increase the time that force is produced. So we're looking at the average force and the time that average force is produced. Now, it's also important to note that we're looking at relative impulse. So there's plenty of big dudes out there that can produce a bigger impulse than Michael Jordan, but relative impulse means what is that compared to your body weight. So if we can produce a higher impulse with a lighter body weight, that's gonna make us jump higher.
Okay, so that means basically that you have to put a lot of force and input into the ground. So we're talking about energy and we're talking about quickness. So we're putting a fast amount of force into the ground with a lower body mass. So we want to be as quick and as fast as possible and the most agile that we can be. So this is some other video right here. This goes into a little bit more depth.
All factors to consider. The first, now energetics, or basically the energy system. Now, when it comes to vertical, we're looking at sort of 1 to 2 seconds of a maximum effort contraction. Your muscles are really just using their stored ATP. There's not much going on here. There's not really much you can do in a one-off instance. When it comes to repeat jumps, that's another story. Okay, number 2. When we talk biomechanics, we're really talking about joint angles and levers, the ability to use your body and the technical factors that make you more effective and more powerful. So with biomechanics, there's kind of 2. Arm swing, and when we talk about arm swing, we're talking about up and down. And second is joint sequencing. That's your ability to load the body like a spring and then uncoil it in the appropriate order. Now, both these things together are all about improving the ability and the efficiency of the stretch shortening cycle.
Okay, so we're talking about the first one is about the amount of energy that we can produce in a 1 to 2 second quick burst. The second one is basically your technique. So the ability to sequence your joints up, sequence your arm swings up, sequence your double arm lift, all of that kind of things, those matter. So one, we're trying to increase the amount of force that we can do in a 1 to 2 second burst. And then 2, we need to really get our technique down and be very efficient in our movements.
A bad athlete kind of looks like this, where they're eccentric, and then the amortization phase down the bottom, there's a lag, there's a bit of latency there, and then they come out and they create their concentric power. Now, if you are a more explosive, more reactive, a stronger athlete, a better jumper, you're going to be able to load that eccentric portion faster, but also get out of it faster. So that means not only do you load the eccentric, that down part of the jump, quicker and more explosively, you get out of the bottom, the amortization phase, faster, and therefore create more concentric power, taking more of that eccentric load with you. Okay, the third thing is really the physics of the jump. And when we talk about the physics, we're really talking about the ability for your body to displace the center of mass. To do that, you really have to beat gravity. That's probably the key. That's the overarching principle. That's the one thing we're really trying to improve when it comes to being better jumpers. To achieve more velocity, that's when we start looking at the physiology, the things that are going on in our body that we can improve to make us better jumpers. So obviously, velocity at takeoff, that means speed is going to be really important. And then when we talk speed, there's speed of contraction, and that ultimately creates more speed of limb and more speed and more torque around our limbs and around our joints. Now, accompanying speed is strength or force development. These two, your speed and your force capacity, that's basically power. Force times speed, that is the definition, that is the equation for power. And power is king. Power is absolutely key when it comes to everything in sport. Now when it comes to force, the factors going on here, type 2 fibers, now that's a bit genetic, but you can shift your fibers with your training type. Next, you want to down-regulate your Golgi tendon organs. These guys are the rate limiters inside your tendon that tell you how much tension you can or can't produce based on how safe they feel. So if you can make those guys a little bit shut off, you can effectively create more force. Next, you want to increase your neural drive. That's basically like giving yourself a software upgrade. If you can make your brain and your nervous system more explosive, you're going to jump higher. And the fourth point is cross-sectional area, CSA. That's how big your muscles are. A bigger muscle can ultimately create more force, but increased cross-sectional area has a downside, because the bigger your muscles, the more body mass you have to carry around with you every time you jump. So when it comes to body weight, there's kind of a sweet spot. You want enough muscle to create force, but you don't want to have to carry extra baggage. So being lean, and also to a degree, being lighter. Lighter people tend to jump higher because they can create more velocity and more force relative to their weight, which is actually another really good point. Force and strength, Force and strength, that's really about being relative to body weight. So you can be as strong as you want, but if you also weigh a truck, that's going to make it hard. So if you can be lighter, but still stronger, that's going to help you jumping, because ultimately, that gives you more ability to create velocity at takeoff, because you're moving a smaller object. Okay, back to where we were. So body mass, leaner and lighter is really important. Some other factors that are going on here. Flexibility and mobility is massive. You can create all the force you want, all the speed you want, but if your joints don't have the range to, number one, be loaded like springs, and then number two, to explode and to create triple extension to leave the ground, all that force is for nothing, because you just can't put it through enough range. The more range you can take your muscles and your joints through, the more they work like springs, because they can be loaded tighter and obviously give you more energy back. The last thing is kind of the opposite with your tendons. For every bit of flexibility and mobility you want through your muscles and your joints, you want your tendons to have what's called stiffness. That means when your muscles pull on them, your tendon doesn't actually move much relative to its original shape, so it holds its tightness and its tension. That tendon stiffness, it's a yucky term, I hate the word stiffness, but it is what it is. Stiffness, so that tendon stiffness we're talking about here, that directly links into your stretch shortening cycle. The ability for you to get into eccentrically and then out of concentrically those loaded muscles in that loaded bottom position. So there you have it. That's what sort of constitutes and makes up a vertical leap. Get these things right and improve these things over time, you'll ultimately jump higher. That's what it's all about.
Squat anatomy.
So we're talking about a little bit of the anatomy and how he was talking about muscle fibers moving and muscle ligaments and the actual technique of jumping. So if you don't know anything about your muscles at all and you don't know anything about the squats and you don't know anything about what's going on, these little videos would be pretty nice. If you do, then you can obviously skip ahead into the workouts. But these are some pretty good videos to start off with. They're kind of interesting and they give a nice little insight.
Which muscles work in the squat? How does the body move? Let's examine this together. If we try to perform the squat without an active muscle system, the body will collapse. So which muscles must we add to the skeleton in order to get it back up to standing position? The first muscle we connect to the bones is the quadriceps femoris. One side connects to the tibia and the other to the femur and the pelvis. Now, let's activate the muscle and see what happens. The muscle extends the knee and the leg straightens. What do we do now? The leg's straightened, but the body is still leaning forward. How will we lift the trunk? How will we straighten the trunk from a position of flexion to extension? Let's try to connect another muscle to it, where one end is connected to the pelvis and the other to the femur. This muscle is the gluteus maximus. In addition, we will add another muscle that will help to lift the trunk. We'll connect one side to the lower part of the pelvis and the other side to the tibia. These are the hamstrings. Now, let's activate these muscles and see what happens. The muscles pull the pelvis and the trunk lifts. We see that the whole movement is performed through the hip joint, hip extension. Oops, we have another problem. The spine is not stable. This is the time to strengthen and stabilize it. This muscle belt is the spinal erectors. And in addition, we will wrap the abdomen in a belt that maintains intra-abdominal pressure. This is the transversus abdominis. Let's activate all the muscles and see the result. We have good movement. Oops, not yet. We'll try to get the knees that collapsed forward back into place. Contraction of the gastrocnemius and the soleus will pull the tibia backward and prevent the knee from collapsing forward. Let's check the final result. Now we have a good squat. In this video, we tried to clarify the main muscles that are active when performing the squat. Of course, there are other synergist and stabilizing muscles that we did not present in this video. We'll show them in other videos. Good luck with your next squat.
So squatting basically is the most important exercise in jumping. You're loading that decentric muscle and then you're exploding eccentrically. So all the way into your glutes, your quads, your hamstrings, your calves, which is basically the gastrocnemius and your soleus. Anytime you go up on your toes, that's what your calves are, your gastrocnemius and your soleus are flexing. So the model there would fall forward without the calf muscles, because when you contract your toes, that's what those two muscle groups are firing. So you can just think about in your mind, if you're step closing, you're loading up and you're driving your steps, you're really using your hamstrings and you're driving your glutes into that approach, and then you're going down into a kind of a squatting motion, which is firing your hips, and then you're ascentrically going up with your quads firing, and then finally your toes are snapping off the ground into that calf and into that soleus and gastrocnemius. So those are kind of some muscle groups that you're firing off of. Here's another one with a split squat.
Split jump. Split jump is a plyometric exercise that strengthens the gluteus maximus, quadriceps femoris, and calf muscles. Get into a lunge position and jump upward. Quickly reposition legs and land with feet in opposite positions. On landing, absorb the forces progressively through the feet, ankles, knees, hips, and back. The gastrocnemius. This is primarily involved in jumping, running, and lower body plyometric exercises. The gluteal muscles are powerful hip extensors for jumping and other explosive movements. The quadriceps muscles are involved in extending the knee in jumping and sprinting movements. All these active muscles also play an essential part in decelerating the body during landing. The hamstrings assist in hip extension and play a significant role in powerfully extending the hip for explosive jumps. The soleus assists in ankle plantar flexion. The main stabilizers are the core muscles and the gluteus medius. Initial view of the core muscles that stabilize the spine and maintain intra-abdominal pressure. Arm swing helps to increase vertical jump height. The anterior deltoid flexes the shoulder, raises the arm. Arm swings contribute to enhancing jump height not only by raising the center of gravity of the arms, but also by augmenting the work of the lower extremity joints, especially the hip and ankle joints.
Okay, so that's basically a little bit about the body here. So, I mean, it's talking about things that are volleyball related with your arm swing and things that coaches say, you know, drive your hips, drive your legs, increase your double arm lift, really drive your approach. These are all things that are muscular, physical based, and things that it's good to have just a general knowledge of before you get into these kind of exercises and stuff. So we're going to get into some exercises here. First off, let's get into the first category of just straight heavy weights. I would get into just squats, basically back squats or front squats. Other ones would be just straight lunges with weights on your with dumbbells in your hand, sumo squats, split squats, all these things. You can write these down, and then you can kind of just Google search and find a lot of pictures and images of just standard squats, standard front squat, standard back squat, lunge, just forward lunges, and that's pretty much all you really need to know for a heavy strength. So we're going to build up a program, and that program is going to consist of these 4 different types. First off, you want to incorporate one day, one thing, then the next day another thing, and then the third day combined. So say, for example, the first day we're going to do really heavy weights, so the heavy weights, and then we're going to do just body plyometrics after. So we're going to incorporate kind of 2 of these things a day. So we're going to pick kind of 2 major subjects and then work on those per day. You know, we're going to work out at least 4 to 5 times a day. A week. You're going to work out 4 to 5 times a week on these exercises. And one of these days can be just body weight or explosive movement. So it's not like every single day you're overloading your weights and you're getting really heavy weights all the time. So you want to do heavy weights at least twice a week. You want to do all the other explosive movements. You can do that pretty often. And then the body weight explosive movements like the jumps and the fast movements and the ladders, the speed work, all that kind of things, you can do that almost 6 to 7 times a week. You could really, there's no real cap on that kind of thing. That's kind of firing your neurological system and kind of getting things going, and it's not a lot of pressure and it's not a lot of impact. So we're going to start off with kettlebell swings here. So this is a good example of some kettlebell swings. This would be the easier weight category, that is explosive movement with weights. So that second category that we wrote down. So again, let's write down 4 different categories. First category is heavy weights. Second category is easier weights that are body movements, that are athletic movements. Third are plyometrics and sprints, and fourth are resistant band workouts. So this would fall under category 2. Again, this would fall under category 2 also. This is a very dynamic movement. Look how low that hip is going. Look how that knee on that right knee is being very strong and over the shoulder. So we really want to focus on the technique And remember the ab muscles that we talked about. They're really interesting. The core is keeping the body lined up, right? So he's going up and down, so he's really lining up that leg. Here, this quad muscle and the calf is really pushing, and then that hip right here is really loading up at this point. That's when you're descending, and now this leg muscle angle is really a lot of angle and a lot of force that needs to be pushed, but your abs have to be strong to keep this body motion up. All right, so you want to do about 10 each leg, 2 to 3 sets, and then switch each leg. So 10 on one leg, 10 on the other leg, and then rest. And we're going to rest for a good 2 minutes in between sets. So we want to really not wear ourselves out so much when we're doing this, because we want to do fast, quick. We want to get very quick twitch muscle fibers. So we don't want to, we actually do want to rest and really give it our all each time. So we're not trying to just kill ourselves with cardio. This is not cardio, this is power training. So we're going to give ourselves some rest, and we're going to do really explosive full movements. It's really counterproductive if you just kind of go through the motions here. You kind of really get in what you put out. So you really have to put in a lot of force and a lot of energy during those things. So I'd rather you almost take extra rest and then really give it your all explosive movements in these exercises rather than just going through the exercises. So again, loading one leg at a time. This falls under category 2, easier weight with explosive body movement. This also falls under number 2. This is a nice little kind of movement pattern sequence. So you can see it's all on one leg, to the left, to the right, to forward, to back. Basically, you can put markers and then you switch legs. So to the out, then back, then cross. So again, here's a little different exercise. So these are all just options and little variants that we want to throw in there. So here, forward, back, forward, back, forward, back, keeping quickness too with your body motion. Keeping that chest up. This would go under category 3, which would be just kind of body weight plyometric movements. Since you're not using any weight, this is really an interesting motion. If you can't get all the way down that far, this is pretty extreme. This is a really good amount of flexibility. That's how we talked about mobility and flex joint movements. This is a lot of force, putting a lot of energy down. If you can only get this far, that's fine. If you can only get this far, we're going to need to work on it a little bit. But if you can get all the way down and still not fall, that's pretty impressive. I don't expect that, but that'd be something to really work for. Right here would be a good, right about there would be a good benchmark at first. That would be really good. That's pretty extreme. So if we can get to that point, good, but don't force yourself too early. Again, this is kind of the thing you can work on almost every day, this. And these are body weight, explosive body weight, easy movements. These fall underneath your bladder drills, your easy plyometrics here. So front squat, we're going to load up kind of a lot of weight here. He's doing it pretty easily, but if you're going to load up a lot of weight, then that falls under category 1, where it's just kind of a simple movement. So we learned on that video a lot about what's going on with our body and what kind of muscles we have to be good at. So this is a good example to follow. This is perfect technique. This is really good, keeping the chest up, really loading on those quads, on those glutes. And the toes, the last second, the toes right there kind of push up a little bit, but we're keeping our head aligned. Everything looks good. So this falls under number 2 also because we're doing actual jumps with weights, right? So anything we do with weights and we do athletic movements like volleyball movements with weights, that falls underneath the second category. And I would like you to make a plan on your own, putting these 4 categories together and then listing and then doing these 4 categories of jumps and then putting together kind of a game plan. All right, so here is Wilfredo Leon. He's a volleyball player. He's probably one of the best players in the world here. And he has a little home workout that he's doing because of quarantine and COVID, and it shows some pretty basic examples, but he's one of the highest paid players in the world, and some of the examples that he does, it's pretty cool. He's just doing some home workouts, and you can see it's not something super crazy. It's just a nice, easy. Here's just a picture of him just to hit, just to see how explosive this guy actually is. So he has basically the fastest serve in the world. So you can see he's a relatively lean guy. Again, a little bit about that jump. He's really loading on those quads. He's following through with his arm. He's reaching up. That arm, everything is contracted. And in midair, he's done all the work. So right now, you can't, once you've left the ground, you can't do anything about your jump anymore. Your jump's done. So now he's loading up. That's a different motion here. He's really doing a really good job of contracting and getting his hit going. But that actual load up on the jump is what we're talking about. And once you've left the ground, once you literally get off the ground, you can't do anything more about your jump. So he lowers his body. See how he's lowering into a squat kind of motion. Double arm lift, good. Exploding up. I have another video at the very end. It's going to be of another player, and you can see the full motion. That's when I'm really going to go over the technique of integrating all this into your actual volleyball jump. But right now, it's just kind of an example. I just want to show you before I show his workouts that he's been doing. So, yeah, he's creating a lot of force and a lot of energy very quickly. We talked about that video. Talked about the good athletes produce a lot of force in a very short amount of time and then get off the ground very quick. You can see very quick. All right, so here he is at home. He's just doing a basic squat and just barely touching a chair. So he's sitting at home. He's got a weight in between his arms. You can use a bunch of water bottles. You can use a backpack. You can use pretty much anything. And this is not a whole lot of weight. I mean, we're talking about one of the most explosive, strongest athletes in the entire world here, and that's how much weight he's using. So it's not like he's going crazy here and squatting 500 pounds and producing all this stuff. So he's basically just tapping barely onto the chair and then coming up. Onto the chair and coming up. That's category 1. So this is another one. This is kind of a deadlift exercise. So this is also category 1. You can use just little simple weights, but right here you can see it's a very strong aligned back, and this is really working the hamstrings here. So the hamstrings are really contracting here and then straightening the whole back area up and then pinching the back very strong, making the hamstring very tight. So again, your hamstrings are very important. You're kind of loose with your arms here. It's kind of dead weight. Going down, keeping your back, your head, shoulders up. Going down into a nice squatted position and then exploding up. So here, easy up. So that would be category 1 here. And the famous mountain climbers, which if you've been on one of my squads, you know that this is important. And so this would be one of those everyday exercises you can do pretty easily. So let's go back to the mountain climbers really quick. See how far that knee is going. See, I talked about this a lot. Look how far that knee is going up. It's really a full motion mountain climber. So we're really getting that hip to move and explode. So we're moving quick and fast, explosive hips. Here's kettlebells. This is number 2 again. You can see the other guy was doing kettlebells. Kettlebells are a really good job because they're really getting these muscles firing. They're really getting the top of the legs firing here. The leg motion is really getting up. And it's working on kind of a jumping, kind of similar motion as jumping. And you don't have to do them super heavy either, but they're a really good exercise for your jump. Again, here's the squats. Squat, this is a really good motion. Try to keep this tempo, try to keep this pace, try to keep this weight. Tap the chair. You can put a chair there. He's just barely tapping it and then lifting up. Again, a hamstring curl, this is really good. So you can really see the back is getting strong and the hamstrings are really curling and getting strong here too. This would be a number 3. Then you can modify it by kind of adding up, and that's kind of adding a little bit extra on that hamstring here. Great exercise here, great exercise. And again, he's doing a little hamstring curl, and he's got his little kid hanging on his little kid there. So again, kind of funny, adding some weight, but you can see his feet are around that ball and really gripping it, because when you're gripping like that, you're really gripping your hamstrings now. So we want that hamstring to really be activated and pulling.